All right, today we're tracking a tiny traveler that has a huge global impact, Rhipicephalus sanguineus, or as it's more commonly known, the brown dog tick. Now, this isn't your average tick you might find out in the woods. Oh no, this is a highly specialized parasite that has managed to make itself at home, quite literally, all over the world. So let's dive in and see what makes this little pest such a formidable globetrotter. So here's our game plan. We'll start by properly meeting this pest. Then, we'll get into its wild strategy for invading our homes. After that, we'll explore the really serious diseases it can carry, how we diagnose and treat them, and most importantly, how we can all prevent infestations, and we'll take a peek at what the future of tick control might look like. Okay, first things first. Let's get to know our subject. You know what they say, to defeat the enemy, you gotta know the enemy. And believe me, this one is one seriously successful parasite. And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When you think tick, you probably picture forests, tall grass, not your living room. So how did Rhipicephalus sanguineus completely flip the script and evolve to thrive where most other ticks just can't? Indoors. What is its secret? Okay, so here's a key term you need to know. Ectoparasite. It's just a fancy way of saying it lives on the outside of its host. Unlike, say, a worm that lives inside, this guy hangs out on the skin. And its host of choice? Almost always our dogs. It latches on, feeds on blood, and then drops off, all without ever really going inside the body. You know, sometimes those long scientific names are really revealing. And this one, it's like a little story. Rhipicephalus comes from the Greek for fan-like head, which is exactly what its mouth parts look like under a microscope. And sanguineus? Well, that's Latin for blood red. Pretty on the nose, right? Given its color and, of course, its total dependence on blood. And here's where it fits in the grand scheme of things. It's an arthropod, sure, but more specifically, it's an arachnid. That means its closest relatives are actually spiders and scorpions. It belongs to the family of hard ticks, named for that tough shield they have on their backs. So now that we know what it is, let's look at how it became so incredibly successful. This tick pulled off an amazing feat, spreading from its origins in Africa to pretty much every continent by mastering a very unique strategy, becoming a true global houseguest. So, what's its secret sauce? Well, here are the big ones. But that middle one, its endophilic nature, that is the real game changer. It means it loves living indoors. It doesn't need a damp forest. It can complete its entire life cycle in the cracks and crevices of a nice, warm home. It basically hitched a ride with our dogs and just never looked back. And that's how we get to what you might call the unwanted souvenir problem. Think about it. In cooler places like the Netherlands, this tick can't really make it through the winter outside. So how does it get there? It catches a ride on a dog coming back from a holiday, or on a rescue dog being imported from a warmer country. And this is where things can get out of hand and fast. You see, it's a 3-host cycle, but here's the crazy part. All 3 hosts can be the very same dog. After each blood meal, the tick just drops off and molts right there in your home, in a crack in the floorboard, behind the sofa, and then it just seeks out its next meal. A few ticks can turn into a massive infestation without ever leaving the house. And if you're wondering how an infestation can suddenly pop up in a house that's been empty for a while, well, look at this number, 568 days. That's its superpower. An unfed adult tick can survive, just waiting patiently for a host for over a year and a half. Incredible resilience. Okay, so having these things in your house is obviously a major nuisance. But the real danger? It's not the bite itself. It's what the tick is carrying. This thing is a little taxi service for some seriously nasty pathogens that can make our dogs, and sometimes even us, very, very sick. So here's the rogues gallery of pathogens it can transmit. The big one it's most notorious for, is Ehrlichia canis, which causes a disease called canine monocytic ehrlichiosis. But it doesn't stop there. It also carries protozoans that cause canine babesiosis, and even the bacteria responsible for Rocky Mountain spotted fever in humans. This diagram gives you a great visual of how something like canine babesiosis works. It all starts with a bite from an infected tick. The parasite gets injected, and it makes a beeline for the dog's red blood cells. It gets inside, multiplies like crazy, and then bursts the cell, which leads to severe anemia. Then a new, clean tick bites that same dog, picks up the parasite, and boom, the cycle starts all over again. Now, that disease I mentioned earlier, canine monocytic ehrlichiosis, is a really sneaky one. It has these 3 phases. There's the acute phase, right after infection, where the dog feels sick. But then it can go into this subclinical phase. The dog looks totally fine, maybe for years, but the bacteria is still hiding in its body. If it reemerges as the chronic stage, it can be absolutely devastating, even fatal.
All right, so let's say a dog gets bitten, and we suspect an infection. What happens next? How do vets actually figure out what's going on? And once they do, what tools do they have to fight back?
Well, it's kind of like detective work. Vets have a few tools. The old school way was to look for the bacteria in blood under a microscope, but that's often not sensitive enough. These days, the real cornerstone is the PCR test. It's incredibly sensitive because it looks for the pathogen's actual DNA, so you know for sure if there's an active infection. And then you have serology tests, which look for antibodies, and those are great for screening, but they can't always tell you if it's a new infection or an old one. And this data really drives home how different the tests can be. You can see some of those quick in-clinic SNAP tests are really useful, but a lab-based test like the REMAP2 ELISA offers a much higher level of overall accuracy when it comes to detecting whether a dog has actually been exposed. Now, what's really interesting is how treatment strategies can differ from place to place. In a country like the Netherlands, where the tick is an import, the approach is often to treat an infection once it's confirmed, usually with the antibiotic doxycycline. But internationally, in places where this tick is everywhere, the strategy is much more focused on prevention, using powerful oral medications that kill ticks shortly after they bite. Okay, so let's get to the most empowering part of this whole story, how we stop this tick before it even starts, and what exciting new tools are on the horizon. When it comes down to it, you have to fight a war on 2 fronts. First, on the host, the dog. That means using effective preventatives, especially before travel, and doing regular, thorough tick checks. But that's only half the battle. You also have to attack the environment. If you have an indoor infestation, that means aggressive cleaning, washing bedding at high temps, and often calling in professional pest control to break that life cycle for good. And looking ahead, the science is getting pretty cool. They're using things like nanotechnology to make natural, plant-based tick repellents more powerful and long-lasting. At the same time, climate modeling is helping us predict where Rhipicephalus sanguineus might be able to survive outdoors next as global temperatures continue to change. Whew, we have covered a lot of detail today. All of this information was pulled together using a Gemini deep search. For those of you who want to dig even deeper into the research, you can find a detailed list of all the sources in the linked Notebook LM document. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. The story of the brown dog tick is more than just a tale about a pest. It's a perfect example of the hidden health challenges that arise in our deeply interconnected world. If you found this explainer valuable, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and let us know your thoughts or questions in the comments below. We would love to hear from you.